Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jacqueline Nasuna, and I'm the Gender, Environment, Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Specialist, working with Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development. I support the RCOE project, including many other projects at RCMRD. Today, I'm here to take you through a session on community engagement. We've gone through so many training sessions on mapping, and a lot of the time we do talk about different kinds of communities of practice, professional communities. But today I'm here to talk to you about grassroots communities. Many of the times we come up with initiatives, but we do not take into consideration the communities, the grassroots communities. And yet the grassroots communities understand the environment more than we do. And for sustainability, we need to ensure that we engage communities adequately and effectively and listen to them. Without this, then our initiatives will not be sustainable. I'll take you through the session and community and engagement and the areas we are going to look at, because most of the times we tend to think that we understand what a community is. We'll go through what a community is, what community engagement is, what community participatory mapping is, the forms of community participatory mapping. We'll also go through a case study on participatory 3D modeling, and then lastly, I will take you through community-based conservation. So, community participatory approaches to geographical information system conservation mapping recognize that the critical role that local communities play in the stewardship and sustainable management of natural resources. These approaches seek to integrate traditional ecological knowledge, lived experiences, and local priorities with spatial data and geospatial technologies. Most of the times, professionals tend to undermine local ecological knowledge. And yet, for example, the indigenous people, as we all know them, they've been very critical in conserving our environment. Therefore, by involving community members directly in data collection, mapping, and decision-making processes, these approaches enhance legitimacy, accuracy, and relevance of conservation planning, which fosters a sense of ownership and accountability while bridging the gap between scientific mapping tools and indigenous local knowledge systems. So such approaches not only empower communities by building technical capacities and facilitating inclusive dialogue, but also contribute to more equitable and context-sensitive conservation outcomes. As you all know, all communities are very different. The community dynamics are very different. So unless you understand the community dynamics, most of these conservation outcomes cannot be sustainable. For example, what the conservation practices in Kenya are very different from the conservation practices in Tanzania or in Nigeria or in Namibia. As landscapes and ecosystems face increasing pressure from climate change, development, and resource exploitation, community participatory mapping approaches offer a pathway to co-create sustainable solutions that reflect both ecological realities and economic aspirations. So we have been talking about community, but what is a community? A community is generally understood as a group of people who share something in common. This could be a geographical location, for example, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda. Cultural identity, it could be, for example, the Luo, the Maasai, the Yoruba. Interests, it could be biodiversity conservation, it could be wildlife. Values, there are so many cultural values or goals, and who interact with one another in ways that create a sense of connection and mutual belonging. Now, to be more specific, in conservation, a community often refers to the people living within or near an ecosystem whose lives and livelihoods and cultural practices are closely tied to the local environment. So what is community engagement? Many times we are talking about engaging people, community engagement, but most of the time people do not fully understand what community engagement is all about. In a conservation and development context, community engagement is the process of building and maintaining meaningful. It has to be a two-way relationships between project implementers and the communities affected or involved in the project. It involves listening, involving, and working collaboratively with community members to identify issues, make decisions, and take actions, and reflect shared goals, values, and needs. If you do not listen, most of the times these initiatives previously, they used to be top-down, but most of the time now we are talking about the bottom-up approach. And this is where we need to give our ear to the communities. In biodiversity, forest and seascape conservation, community engagement ensures that local knowledge, priorities, and cultural values are integrated in planning, implementation, and monitoring. Without including the local knowledge and their priorities, whatever initiative we come up with cannot be sustainable. And most times these initiatives are rejected, or you find that they cannot be implemented. So the principles of, like any other engagement, also community engagement in GIS has some kind of principles that one needs to follow. The first one is inclusivity and participation. One has to ensure all voices, men, women, youth, elders, marginalized groups like indigenous groups are actively involved in data collection, mapping, and decision making. Actually, most of the times, these community activities must be community-led. Then there is an aspect of local knowledge integration. There is need for respect and to incorporate indigenous and community knowledge alongside scientific and technical GIS data. Most of the time, we have that tendency to think that local knowledge or indigenous knowledge is backward. And most of the times, for example, when we are looking at the medicinal, these are coming from the local communities. This knowledge has existed from time immemorial and has been passed from one generation to another. So excluding this knowledge and thinking, that's why most of the times we find that even when we come up with scientific, without including the indigenous knowledge, you find that some of these initiatives are not sustainable. Then there is need for transparency. Share the purpose, process, and outcomes of GIS mapping openly with communities to build trust. Most of the times, if you're not transparent, also the initiative will be rejected. Then we need to build the capacities of our communities. Through building their capacities, we empower communities, for example, with simple digital literacy and mapping skills so that they can use tools themselves, not just provide data. Then you have to take into consideration equity and power sharing. Address the power imbalances by ensuring local communities have equal say in how spatial data is collected, interpreted, and applied. Remember, they know these communities better than we do. So you going into the community and trying to show that you know more than they do actually creates a kind of, they tend to have this tendency to withdraw. So you have to ensure that this equity and power sharing is addressed. Then there is the issue of cultural sensitivity. We need to respect the cultural values, sacred sites, and traditional rules when mapping biodiversity or land use. Then there is accountability. Researchers, NGOs, and governments using GIS must be accountable to the community, ensuring maps serve local needs as well as conservation goals. The moment you do not ensure that their local needs are addressed, then be assured that that initiative will not work. Then most of the time there's an aspect of sustainability that people do not look into. GIS projects should leave behind usable tools, data, and skills that communities can maintain beyond the project's lifespan. Most of the times people come up with projects, but they don't look at the issue of sustainability. And once you involve a community and use their resources in terms of personnel or local materials, even after you leave a community, the communities, because they were engaged gainfully, they are able to continue with the project. Then there's the aspect of free, prior, and informed consent. Consent is very critical. Most of the times, especially when it comes to indigenous communities, they are coerced into providing knowledge, which is it's an abuse of human rights. Communities, first of all, must voluntarily agree to participate, fully understand how their spatial data will be used. Then there's the action-oriented outcomes. Ensure that maps and data are not just academic outputs, but inform real conservation actions and benefit the community. Most of the times people come up with maps for just academic purposes, and yet on the other hand, the community is not benefiting, and yet these maps are meant for the community. So what is community participatory mapping? As long as you're dealing with communities, it has to be participatory. Community participatory mapping is a process that enables local people to actively contribute to mapping their own resources, land and social landscapes, using their knowledge, experiences, and priorities. Remember, they understand the community better than you do. So you going and conducting a session, conducting an exercise without involving them, that's already an abuse of their human rights. It is also a valuable tool in development, environmental planning, land rights, conflict resolution, and resource management, especially in contexts where formal data is limited or where local knowledge is critical. Community participatory mapping combines local knowledge, for example, from locations of resources, cultural sites, problem areas, with mapping tools from simple sketches to GPS and GIS to document, visualize, and communicate information about the landscape. So I'm going to take you through some steps for conducting a community participatory mapping exercise. You have to plan and prepare ahead. First of all, define the purpose. What do you want to map? Without knowing the purpose, then participatory mapping will be unsuccessful. Do you want to map degraded areas, cultural sites, risks like flooding or pollution, wildlife areas or areas where poaching is taking place. You need to understand the purpose. Then you have to conduct a stakeholder analysis, mapping and analysis. You must know who are you going to engage with prior. Without understanding your stakeholders, their needs, the power analysis, then it becomes very difficult to engage a community. And it is always advisable to come up with a stakeholder engagement plan. Involve representatives. Definitely you may not be able to engage all the community members, but at least know the representatives like local leaders, elders, women, youth, marginalized groups. Then you must have logistics. Since it's a community-based, always ensure that even the logistics are as friendly and easier to use. Secure a neutral venue, first of all, where everyone can access, even people who are with disabilities. For example, it should be very near the community. It should have even space enough where children can play. Most of the times, women come with their children. So if you don't have a facility where they can have their children, that means that they cannot participate adequately. Then have large sheets of paper, markers, stickers, natural materials like stone sticks or digital tools, GPS, mobile apps. Simple things that the community can use and understand. Then you need to get their permissions and take consideration of ethics. Secure consent, explain objectives, and establish trust, in that they will know that you're not coming to exploit them or manipulate them to gain something from them. It should be a win-win situation. Address any power dynamics and gender inclusion upfront. Then when you do community mobilization, hold introductory meetings, as many as possible, to explain the process and invite participation. Identify key informants, mapping facilitators like local leaders, elders, farmers, youth, women. Ensure diversity in participation to avoid bias. Then introduce and trust building. Welcome participants and explain the purpose and mapping once now you're ready to conduct your mapping session. Emphasize that all voices matters. There are no right or wrong answers. Clarify that the exercise aims to document community knowledge to inform decisions. Highlight confidentiality and respect. Like any other community, even in your home, you'd want aspects of confidentiality and respect to be adhered to. The moment you emphasize that there are no right or wrong answers, people become more comfortable to discuss issues without fear of being judged. Then group formation. Depending on community dynamics, you need to understand the community dynamics upfront, because sometimes you find people have to work early, go to the gardens. Then you find that sometimes due to our cultural, social norms, men and women cannot be in a group together. So you need to understand those dynamics. So if you are in a community, for example, where men and women don't sit in one, cannot sit in one group, or women, because of their cultural norms, ensure that you have a women-only group, men-only group, youth-only group. Or some communities now, the dynamics have changed. You can see that you can even mix them. And when we are talking about youth, we also talk about female and male youth. Most of the times we have a tendency of thinking that they are just male youth. So having these group formations allows everyone to speak freely, especially women and youth. Most of the times, these are the two categories which are usually marginalized. Then you have to do some training and capacity building. Train local youth, elders and stakeholders in GPS data collection, reading and interpreting satellite imagery, simple GIS software As you're aware now, we are living in the Gen Z era. They are very, very good with especially technology. Make sure that you engage them as much as possible. So build local GIS champions or eco mapping. This brings a sense of pride that they can also, you know, take control of their community. Then now we get down to the mapping activities. There are some common participatory mapping tools that one can use. This includes sketch mapping. Participants draw maps on paper. Make it as simple as possible. You know, we tend to bring these computers to the community, and the community cannot really relate with them. So use simple tools that they can access to draw maps on paper, or even they can use the ground or flip charts. They can include landmarks, natural resources, land uses, cultural sites, infrastructure, or hazards. Encourage group discussion to validate features. Also, you can use transit walks, joint walks with community members across the area to observe. And as you're asking them questions, they know the boundaries, they know the challenges. So these transit walks are very good to discuss different issues and problem areas. Then you can also use resource or thematic mapping. Here you map specific themes like water sources, grazing routes, and land ownership or conflict zones. Or you can use also GPS or GIS mapping. After sketching, key locations may be georeferenced using GPS devices or mobile apps. These points can be digitized into GIS for analysis, layered with satellite imagery or topographic maps. Then after this, they can create base map creation, provide large sheets or ground surface, soil sand for drawing with sticks, ask participants to outline the wetland, for example, or area as they see it. Encourage them to identify landmarks, rivers, roads, schools, and sacred sites. And this is usually very helpful, especially after transit walks. Then as they are doing the mapping, someone should be facilitating, but they do the drawing themselves. You can use some open-ended guiding questions. For example, where do you collect water? They will show you on the map, this is where we collect water, this is where the reeds are, the fish or medicinal plants. You can also ask, where has the wetland shrunk or flooded or degraded? Where is the waste dumped? Where do floods or pollution occur? Where does poaching occur? Then also you can include cultural knowledge areas. Are there sacred sites, taboo areas, zones with traditional practices? These areas are always very, very important to the community because they have the source of their cultural identity. Then also look into gendered spaces. These are areas where you can ask where areas are mainly used by women, men, or youth. Then you can go into a discussion, ask participants, ask them to explain what they draw. For example, who uses this area? Has this place changed over time? And as you're probing, also take notes to accompany the map and ensure quiet voices are encouraged to speak. Then you go through a session of presentation and reflection. Each group, you can separate them first as men, women, youth, and they come up with a map. And then after that, you merge to understand the differences and the similarities. Then facilitate dialogue to reach consensus on key issues. Then if it allows, you can digitize, transfer the community maps, even from the ground, into GIS using GPS points or digitization software. involve local youth or trained participants in the process to build digital mapping capacity. Because after you leave the community, the youth can continue with these activities for sustainability. Then you have to go through a session of validation and feedback, share the final composite map, if it is digitized, with the community, and confirm accuracy. Does this reflect, for example, your reality? Where it does not, adjust if necessary. Remember, we are getting feedback from the community. Then it should not also stop there. It's just not a purpose of just getting a map, but you should have some kind of action planning. So use the map as a basis to discuss solutions, because it's not just a map. The map should be able to sort out an issue. So areas to protect, restore, rehabilitate. Ask them, what's the way forward? Can we come up with community rules for resource use? Do we have potential partners with, for example, NGOs or government who can help us in protecting these areas? So link to future monitoring, with communities empowered to keep updating maps using digital tools. It is so important for the community to keep monitoring these resources. And as you are aware, these areas keep changing over time. So when they are empowered to do the monitoring, they can keep updating the maps as need arises, because most of the times these maps become outdated. So there are different types of community participatory mapping. We have cultural and sacred site mapping, participatory GIS, which will be handled by my colleague Jackie Karimi. We have participatory 3D modeling, which I will handle after this. Resource and land use mapping, transect mapping. Also, community mapping has some key features. If you don't have these features, then it's not community participatory mapping. One, it should be community-led, it should be inclusive, it should be visual and accessible. We've gone through the steps and you can see that all these, it should be empowering. We've talked about training, and it should integrate traditional knowledge and scientific data. So these are some of the pictures. You can see women and a man. They are taking note of that community map, and it was done by them. And then here you can see these are Bushmen from Namibia. This is a digital tool that they are using. This one they were using to map out poaching areas. So these are simple, empowering. It's called a cyber tracker. It is simple and empowering and engaging, and it creates a sense of ownership. So this is the one I was talking about, the ground one. The ground, you can use the ground. You can see there are simple sticks, there are stones, there are leaves, and these form the key of the map. So maybe, for example, maybe the tree over there, small sticks can be representative maybe of a forest. For example, you can see them drawing a sketch, and you can see that the activity is very involving. There are men, there are women, there are youth. Everyone is really interested in this. Then on the right side, you can see a simple map. This was developed by a community in Isiolo in Kenya. Very simple and very easy to understand, and a map that they can relate with. So I'll take you through participatory GIS. What is participatory GIS? My colleague also looked through it, but I just wanted to give you a few highlights. First of all, it has to be collaborative, using geographical information systems and geospatial technologies by local communities to map, understand, and manage their environment. When you engage them in this, it empowers even marginalized or resource-dependent communities to visualize their territories. Remember, visualizing is a key issue. So GIS is not about making maps. Participatory GIS is not about making maps. It's about giving people the tools to define what matters to them and represent that spatially. So you can see pictures, these are women and men, they are in the corner involved in a session, and these are women in their session. And it is, you know, it even allows the mother to come with their child and they participate fully. So what are the key, we'll go through participatory 3D modeling. What are the key features? Building physical scaled 3D models of landscapes built collaboratively by communities using local materials with features placed based on the community input, then digitized for GIS. It has to have a purpose in conservation, for example, watershed planning, habitat mapping, disaster risk management. What are the advantages? It is easy to understand for all literacy levels, visually engaging, and promotes consensus building. And what tools can you use? You can use a cardboard, paper, paint for modeling, digitization through GIS software. So these are, you can see this is an example of tools, and this has been of modeling, and this has been used. It's not new. It's being used world over. So this is a case study that was done in DRC Congo. It was a pilot participatory 3D modeling in a place called Mwenga. You can see that beautiful map, and you can see how engaging it is, how excited they are. You can see that it is involving everyone, women, men, and I can see also some youth. So what were the key issues that were we could borrow from this exercise? The local community was trained to use GPS and to chart geographical coordinates, and the information was collected, worked out, and visualized by a quali-ed operator. 3D maps provided a scaled physical representation of the natural environment with clear contours and landmarks, making it easier for community to interpret and engage with. The visual and tactile nature of the model sparked curiosity and learning across the community groups. Community members were fully involved from building the model to presenting it without relying on external experts. I think as you see, you look at that photo, that picture, there is no external expert. And this fostered a deep sense of ownership. The method placed all participants, youth, elders, women, men, on equal footing, encouraging shared understanding of the territory. It supported effective communication, consensus building, especially in decisions on sustainable resource management. The process was involved legitimized decisions made through mapping because it was inclusive and accessible to all, not just trained cartographers or elites. Elders contribute valuable historical and cultural knowledge, while youth gained insights and learned from the past. So you see there is cross-knowledge exchange between the youth and the elders. The final product, a community-built 3D map, was a source of pride and collective achieved, reinforcing long-term community commitment and land stewardship. So lastly, I'm going to take you through what we call a community-based conservation, where communities can live alongside the conservation areas, and both can benefit. So what is a community-based conservation? It is an approach to conserving biodiversity, natural resources, and ecosystems that places local communities at the center of planning and decision-making and management. So instead of conservation being imposed externally, it recognizes that the people who live closest to the forest, wetlands, and wildlife, or Coastal areas often depend on them for their livelihoods and are best positioned to steward them. Actually, this even prevents exploitation of these conservation areas. Therefore, the key issue here that we should note is that community-based conservation means conservation by the people, for the people and with the people, ensuring that both nature and communities thrive together instead of one outdoing the other. Because even animals can destroy crops, and also human beings can destroy the environment. So what are the key features of community-based conservation? There is community-led leadership, community leadership and participation, integration of livelihoods and conservation, use of indigenous and local knowledge, and empowerment and rights. I have shared a reading material which will take when you read, you'll get a deeper knowledge of all these issues. So there are examples of community-based conservations. For example, there is wildlife conservancies in Kenya. Here you can see local pastoralist communities manage rangelands to support both livestock and wildlife, benefiting from ecotourism revenues. So the pastoralists are benefiting, and at the same time, the wildlife and the livestock can thrive, so they can coexist in the same area. So here is another example, the sacred forest groups in Ghana. So the traditional beliefs protect forest patches used for rituals conserving biodiversity. You know, for example, indigenous communities have a lot of respect for land and some of these forests. But in having this, protecting these forests, they help to conserve the environment. So much as they are sacred, they conduct their traditional rituals, but at the same time, these are also conserving the environment. So there is one also called the Osun Osogbo Sacred Grove in Nigeria. Actually, this is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It contains shrines, sculptures, and artworks honoring the Yoruba goddess Osun. It has become a site where people can come and visit. The Nigerian can get revenues from this, but at the same time they are conserving nature. Then we have the locally managed marine areas in Madagascar and Mozambique. This is an example. They focus on marine biodiversity and fisheries management. So when you involve the community in that, while they are benefiting from the fisheries, at the same time they are helping in conserving as opposed to exploiting these areas. Then lastly, we have also the Ugandan wetland user groups. Communities collectively manage wetlands for sustainable farming, fishing, and water supply. So because land is a resource scarce, is scarce, so they can utilize the wetland and benefit from it without necessarily degrading it. So both the wetland and the human beings can coexist. So this is the end of my presentation, and I would want to end with a quote. When communities draw their own maps, okay, they are not only just recording information, they are reclaiming their voice in decisions about land, resources, and the future. Thank you for listening to me. Asanteni sana. And you can read extensively through using reading material that is shared on the platform. And there will be a short quiz. And I believe it's as simple since most of you have done community work. And I think it will be very easy to pass. Thank you very much.